Lūdzu. Tagad jau vietas visi ir ieņēmuši. Forši.
So it's good that you have taken your seats. Have you chosen the right channel for interpretation? Have you chosen an interpretation channel? I am glad to hear that you're showing thumbs up. I am very glad to see you all in today's afternoon session. This is the first time when Dr. Colins Robertson is in Latvia, is in Riga. He liked yesterday's event, also the traditions of Large Places Day in Old Riga. He made many photos. Colins is the person who already for 30 years have dedicated his life to nutrition and nutritious speciality and research of human body, how human can reach and achieve the best results in sports and in life, as well as how to achieve best results in rehabilitation. And acquire and reacquire one's health. We are going to talk about chronic inflammation, how important nutrition is, how we can measure that, and how we can ensure that. Please, the floor is yours, Colin.
Again, I have no idea what you're saying. Just waiting to be told. So, good afternoon, everybody. I can see some familiar faces in the room now who I either spoke to this morning, but I can see some faces from yesterday evening as well. So today I'm actually going to go through the same presentation that I delivered for some people last night. So for those people who were here last night, your job is to see if I say anything different, or if I say anything that contradicts what I said yesterday. So that's your job. But for everyone else who I've not had the opportunity or privilege of meeting before, my name is Colin Robertson. I'm an exercise and nutrition scientist. I am the Chief Product Officer for Zinzino. I've been in that role since March of this year. I joined Zinzino as the scientific research specialist in December of 2020. And prior to all of that, I've had the most incredible life, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I realized when I was young that I loved sport, and that was where I wanted to work. And so that's what I did. And I've spent the past 3 decades working in high-performance sport, training athletes to take part in 4 Olympic cycles, Beijing, London, Rio, and Tokyo. I've worked in the sports that I'm most passionate about. I've worked in international and national rugby, and a great moment of pride because I've got an Irish background. All my family come from Dublin, and I was the head of performance for Ireland in the Rugby World Cup in 2008 when we went to Australia. I was head of human performance for Ireland Rugby for 4 years. I've worked in Premiership football, national football, international football. I was actually the head of performance for the women's England team back in the day, worked in basketball. You name it, when it comes to sport, I've probably worked there. But I've also worked as a clinical exercise physiologist, and that was in a big district general hospital back in the UK, where we're supporting people who have experienced cancer, cardiovascular disease, pulmonary conditions, stroke, elective and non-elective surgery, people who've had fractures, sprains, all that usual stuff that you would see in a hospital. Working with people who had to lose weight so that they could have life-saving operations, working as a part of huge recovery teams with regards to rehabilitation from cardiovascular disease, cancer, pulmonary, all this kind of stuff. And as a researcher and a practitioner, I'm an environmental physiologist. And you're probably thinking, great, what does one of them do? What one of them does, what I do, really goes down to 2 categories. If you ever go and have a look on PubMed or you look in the research, you'll see my name. Most of my research that I've published is either about sleep, the restorative component of sleep, particularly around athleticism, We actually wrote a consensus statement for the British Journal of Sports Medicine 2 years ago about sleep and the athlete. But also, when people want to go and do something crazy, you'll find someone like me. So when they decide to climb Everest, I've trained and supported several people to climb Everest, row across the Atlantic Ocean in a boat, either on their own or with a few of their friends, race across the Sahara Desert, trek to the North Pole. I've currently got people I'm supporting who are in Antarctica doing some work, and I'm currently training a father and son. The dad is 66, the son is in his early 20s, and they're both going to try and climb to the top of Everest next May. And just a week ago, 24 people came back to the UK who I had trained and prepared to go to Everest Base Camp, which is beyond 5,000 meters, which is incredibly high. Some huge mountains aren't that big. And we had to deal with all the real circumstances of that. Acute mountain sickness, all kinds of difficulty with acclimation, nutritional factors, psychological factors. And so I've really built a career of helping people to give their best effort and to overcome the odds. If you're an Olympic athlete, you have to give not only your best effort, but the best effort that any human is capable of at that time and space. That's what the Olympic Games is all about. If you're participating in professional sport, you're judged by how often you win, so I have to keep you in a winning position. If you're overcoming the worst, if your physician, your doctor, has given you an awful, demanding, challenging diagnosis, and you have to go through treatment and recovery, you find someone like me. And then if you are crazy enough to try and get to the top of Everest, you get someone like me involved. And throughout all of that, all of those years working as a nutritionist, as a strength and conditioning coach, as head of human performance, as a physiologist, as a clinical physiologist, I've really helped people get out their own way, because humans are complex. And more often than not, a human knows what to do, they just don't do it. When it comes to nutrition, I spend most of my time telling people what they already know. You shouldn't eat cake every day. Yeah, I know. Yeah. You shouldn't have biscuits with every coffee. Yeah. I just tell people what they already know. But the hardest thing to get past is yourself, because it comes down to discipline and dedication and willpower. And that's the hard part. And we know when we look around us, the state of the world, a lot of people are struggling in that area. But health has always been my main concern, ever since I was a young boy, because I've always believed we should do health better. I've always believed we have the information and the knowledge, but people don't automatically know that. They don't benefit from that. And how can you make it so that people benefit from it more rapidly? And the reason I moved across from working in big research institutes and big universities, and the reason why I moved across into this role, is because I realized this was the fast way to empower people towards better health. All the research in the world that we write, all the strategies that we put in place, all the committees that I've been a part of, didn't change anything. And in fact, as a nutritionist, standing in front of people for years and years and years, saying you should reduce your sugar, you should have less chocolate, you should reduce your fast food, you should do this, you should cut all these things out, didn't change anything. Because what people need is something that they can take, that they can do on a daily basis, that is easy. And if it's easy, they can make it consistent. And if you're consistent, that's where you get the best health benefits. You are the outcome of what you do most often, not what you do once in a while. And as a nutritionist, when I do one-to-one consultations with people in hospital or in performance or at home, and I say, what do you eat? And they'll say, oh yes, I eat broccoli. Great. How often? Once in a while. Christmas Day. And you go, okay, what do you eat like every day? Not such a good story. And then people will think that, when they eat convenience foods, packaged foods, confectionery, all these things, and they'll think that the power of an apple can undo all of that. And they go, yeah, but I do eat chocolate and cakes and sweets and I do have fast food, but I had an apple. Yeah, it's not going to undo all that. So how we are is how we behave. How you function is based on how you function. How many of you, don't put your hands up, don't tell me, keep it secret, but how many people before coming here today have done some exercise, been physically active, because if that's what you do most often, that's how you'll be. But if it's not, then it's not how you'll be. And so what we need is to get people where they've got good habits, where they can do things easily every single day, and it makes a positive impact. And so what I'm going to talk you through, he says, moving on to the first slide after God knows how long, speaking with just a picture of me. That's quite arrogant, isn't it? I don't put this slide together. Zinzino Corporate do that. If it was me, it'd just be maybe that bit. Because you don't need a picture of me to know that it's me, given that I'm stood here. Had to check it to have the same shirt on then. I do own more than one shirt. So, what I'd like to take you through now is to set the context of this. And then I'm going to talk you through how it is myself and the team that I work with provide an easy option to improve health. Because health should be easy. We've made it this complex mess, and we need to unpack that. And we need to empower people to have better health. And we can, I promise you. So you are what you eat. That's an old saying back home. You are what you eat, and it's true. If what you eat most of the time isn't great, then sadly neither are you. It has a direct impact on your health. This is what we call epigenetics. Epigenetics are the things that we do that shape our gene expression. Physical activity, exercise, whether you smoke, whether you drink alcohol, nutrition. You have a relationship with food. You eat food every single day, I would imagine most of you, if not all of you. And everything you eat either has a positive or a negative impact on your well-being. There is no neutral. It either contributes positively or it contributes negatively. That's just a fact. And so knowing that, we have to make decisions on, well, do we want things to be more positive or more negative when we're having something that literally changes how our genes behave and function. And when we get down to that level, it's easy to see how powerful this is in the context of how it shapes our health. But not about simply what you eat. It's about what you can absorb. And we're going to delve into that in a little bit as we go through this presentation. But it goes back to what I was saying just a moment ago. When people tell me, well, I eat, I'll have cornflakes for breakfast, and then I'll have a biscuit at break, and then for lunch I'll have a packaged sandwich, and they talk me through all these foods, and they expect the apple to undo all of that. But the harsh reality is the impact on the gut of all those foods, those ultra-processed foods, those processed foods, damages the environment so much that you can barely absorb any of the nutrients out the apple anyway. You might as well not have it, depending on how your diet is weighted. You've got to put yourself in a winning position. 80% of what you eat should be working towards your health. And then the 20% that you can have a dessert, you can have a chocolate bar once in a while, that's great. Do that with no concerns about your health. Do that completely guilt-free. But that's not the reality of the world we live in. Unfortunately, it really isn't. A theme that I'm going to take us through today relates to this, which is the omega-6-3 balance. And if you've never heard of that before, brilliant, because you can't get it wrong, because I'm going to help you to get it right. And if you have heard about that before, what I'm going to say today will either build on your understanding or it might challenge you. Both of those are fine. And at the end, we're going to have a question section. If I say something that challenges what you previously thought, feel free to ask a question about it. That's how the best science is done. There's a phrase, and we were discussing this earlier, people will say on social media, ooh, don't question the science. That's the most unscientific thing you can ever say. Science is all about being challenged. That's how we do science, is we ask better questions. We don't take anything at face value. That's how we update our understanding. That's how we improve things. If we didn't question the science, you would have all arrived here today with square wheels, and it would have been a bumpy journey. We need to always question the science, so feel free to ask questions towards the end. But the omega-6-3 status in the world is nothing new. When I was a young child, which goes back a way now, growing up on the streets of Dublin and Liverpool, my mum was Irish, my dad was Scottish. For some reason, they decided to move to Liverpool. And even back then, in the 70s and the 80s, my mum and my dad, they took cod liver oil capsules because it was recognized a long time ago that we needed to increase our levels of dietary omega-3. And it was difficult to do just through the diet alone because it means you have to eat fatty fish pretty much every day. So there's nothing new about this concept. The science in the area that recognizes the omegas, which are what we call the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the PUFAs, they are what we call the essential fats. Zinzino didn't invent that term. When I first did my first degree a long time ago, and we did the first nutrition lecture, and we went over the fundamentals. We were taught about the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the omegas being the essential fats. So if I said to you, it's essential that you do this, what would you think? Let's say we were stood at a railroad track and a train is coming, and I said, for your safety, it's essential that you step backwards. How would you interpret that? Would you go, what he's saying is, it might be a good idea, but I don't have to? Is that what you think? No. You'd probably think, right, it's essential, which means I have to do it. The essential fats mean that they are essential. You have to have them, and you have to have them in the right ratio. But sadly, they're missing from our diet. And sadly, the state of play at the moment is plenty of omega-6. We can get that really easily. It's in most processed foods. When we look at certain types of oils that people cook with at home, saturated in omega-6. But the omega-3 is really difficult. The way you should be able to get it, just to be clear, as a food-first nutritionist, is to go, right then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase how much omega-3 I eat, and I'm going to decrease how much omega-6 I eat, so that I've got a better balance, a better ratio. More of the 3, less of the 6 in my diet. That's where I need to be. Brilliant. Best of luck. Because to do this, you need to have the marine-based omega-3, which you can either get from the algae or you can get from the fish that ate the algae. You need the EPA and the DHA. To reach the amount you need to make a difference to your blood measures, which I'll go through in a moment, you would arguably have to consume a serving of fresh, wild fish, freshly line caught every day. That's how much you'd need to consume. And it would have to be nutrient dense, nutrient rich, to get the right amount of levels of omega-3 in your diet. Or people will say, well, I'm a vegan or vegetarian, so can't I just get lots of algae? Yes, you can. Sadly, though, your body is really, really poor at breaking it down, digesting it, and absorbing it. So you have to do something to the algae, which is okay, but it has to be turned into a type of supplement. You won't get it just by eating algae. That would be a really poor strategy. And to get the amount you need, you would literally have to eat a mountain of algae. So neither of these are effective, and they're not effective or sustainable. First of all, I'm sure you know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. There are 7.8 billion people living on the planet right now, and it's rapidly moving towards 8 billion. A few years ago, the World Health Organization produced a report that estimated that 6.3 billion people in the world have an omega-3 deficiency, that they didn't have anywhere near enough omega-3 in their diet. So forget the 7.8 for a moment. Let's focus on the 6.3. 6.3 billion. What that means is, to do this through the diet, we would have to take from the sea on a daily basis 6.3 billion fish so that we can all have one. Some people are going, okay, let's do that. Think about that for a moment. We would have to divide the population of the world in two: the ones who fished in the daytime and the ones who fished in the nighttime. And when you woke up, you get to eat your fish, and then you'd go fishing. And then you go to bed, and they'd wake up, and they'd eat their fish, and then they'd go fishing. And it'd run out pretty quick, because just imagine if we were taking 6.3 billion fish out the sea every day. By the way, they have to be fresh, line caught, because intensively aquacultured fish don't have a sufficient amount of nutrients in them. So we're all out there fishing, trying to catch a fish. So it's practically impossible. It's ecologically unethical, immoral, and unsustainable. We just can't do that. 100 years ago, there were 2 billion people living on planet Earth, and now we're nearly at 8 billion. We have to think in modern times. We can't think of these romantic ideas of days in the past where Uncle Tom went out fishing and brought home an oaf for the family, and everyone ate salmon and potatoes that were grown in the field. It'd be lovely, wouldn't it? Lovely. The world's moved on, and we need to as well. We need to have 21st century solutions for 21st century problems. We just need to do things differently. And so this issue remains. Like I've said, the World Health Organization themselves published a report. They estimate 6.3 billion people are deficient in an essential nutrient. This is the real food pyramid. Whilst 80% of what you do should contribute towards your health and your wellness, and then you should be able to indulge yourself with that 20% and have a cake and do those things that you want to do, that's not the facts. This is how the Western world behaves and eats. Ultra-processed foods take up about 60% of the average diet. On top of that, then, you've got around 15 to 20% of moderately processed foods, until we work to the top, which are the minimally processed or non-processed, the whole foods, fresh foods. Fresh foods take up less than, on average, 10% of the modern diet. The most people are 60 to 80% ultra-processed to moderately processed foods, which are energy high, lots of calories, nutritionally low. Barely any nutrition in them. And none of this is sensational. I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm just telling you facts. And we've seen this happen in real life situations. So there was an interesting project back in the 90s that was called the Japan Project, because Japan had its indigenous, its localized diet. It embraced the Western way of doing food, with lots of the convenience and fast food places becoming firm within their eating behavior. And in 10 years, they went from having really good health statistics to the exact same type of health statistics the USA, UK, and places like that had. So they saw a deterioration in 10 years. It happened even quicker more recently, and this is what's called the Beijing Project. So when you look at certain areas of China, Shanghai, Beijing, whereby they've adopted and embraced the fast food concept, we see the same. And it happened in less than 3 years. Those areas are dealing with the same health consequences as countries like ours that have been eating this way for much longer. And now India is following suit. Big cities, convenience, ultra-processed, transformation for the negative on their health. Some of these foods, depending on what mood I'm in when I'm talking about it, in my opinion, my professional opinion, some of these foods aren't foods. They give you so little from a nutritional point of view, and they cause so much harm in the process, I don't think they should be called foods. But that's a different campaign. Some of them are okay. They will give you little bits of nutrient, they'll give you energy, they'll give you calories. But it is not a coincidence, it is a direct cause and effect that as the world around us has increased its rate of obesity decade by decade on an average of 10%. We've seen the pandemic before the pandemic, which is type 2 diabetes, increase year on year over this time. More people are getting more sick at a younger age. We've seen all this, and it directly correlates to our food behavior. The sure sign way that you're more likely to develop a non-communicable disease is as your waistline expands. No one likes to talk about it. They find it's an uncomfortable conversation. I don't care. I don't care how you look. I just care about your health. To me, it's not about vanity or aesthetics or whether or not someone's attractive. It's none of my business. It's all about how healthy you are and how I can reduce your risk of disease. And we know that type 2 diabetes is a gateway disease. And what that means is if you get it, you're more likely to get something else. So we need to stop this. We need to tap the brakes. We need to recognize the cause of the problem. And this is it. This is how people eat. This is the reality. 80% working against them, not working for them. And so when they think, well, I did have that apple, the environment itself has been so compromised by these ultra-processed foods, you can't absorb the apple. Not much of it, not rarely. You certainly can't optimize it. And also, these foods have re-engineered two things. One is our taste buds. Less and less people now, particularly children, like fatty fish. Parents report struggling to get their children to eat it, to consume it. Adults prefer not to eat it. They don't like it. It's too distinct, too strong a taste, because these foods are based around taste first. That's how these food companies work. How well does it taste? And then we'll figure the rest out. And they also use something that's called, and this is not, again, I promise you, this is not like a conspiracy theory thing. This is just a fact. They use what's called bliss point technology. And that's the magic moment that we can trigger dopamine. Dopamine is the reward hormone. Makes you feel better about yourself. If you get to the top of Everest, you have huge amounts of dopamine. You feel amazing. You've conquered the world. If you run across the finish line at your local 5K race, if you write an essay at school and you get a good mark, you get dopamine. It's the reward mechanism. You feel great, but I can make you feel like that just by giving you the right amount of sugar, fat, and salt. And when people are feeling unhappy, when they've had a tough day, when they've had their heart broken, and they go home and they go, right, I'm going to comfort myself, I'm going to have some comfort food. They don't go, right, it's been tough, it's been horrible, I hate him, he's broken my heart, I'm going to sit on the couch, I'm going to eat some cauliflower with some carrots and a bit of broccoli, just to make myself feel better. They don't. What they do is they go to the freezer and they bring out the big tub of ice cream. And they go, now, there's the comfort food. I'll soon be feeling better. And you do. Physiologically, you do. You take a few scoops, and that kicks in, and the dopamine rushes in and goes, wow, you feel loads better. You're amazing. And they know how to engineer it into food. Makes food addictive. I don't know if you have it here. I'm guessing you do. There was a big tube of potato chips. They're still about. They're huge, really popular back in the UK and America. You do have them, don't you? I don't like saying brand names. Pringles, yeah. And the tagline in the UK was, once you pop, you just can't stop. Was that the same here? Did you have the same tagline? Yeah, once you pop, you just can't stop. Just think how sinister that is. There is no nutrition in that tub. It's refined carbohydrate, 0 vitamins, 0 minerals, 0 hydration. It's just saturated trans fats and refined carbohydrates, packed full of calories, and you're going to eat the whole tub. Imagine if I was on the street corner where you live, and I was speaking to your child, or your mum or your dad, and I had something in a package, and I said, listen, once you take this, you'll never be able to stop. Do you want to buy it? Would you have called the police? Would you go, there's something sinister going on here? This person wants to get my loved one addicted to this thing, because once they start, they're not going to stop. But it's okay when it's an advert full of young people having a party. And we notice none of them are overweight. They're all like that. But once you pop, you can't stop. No nutrition, highly addictive, triggers a predictable response in the brain. And on average, I don't know if you know this, but there's been lots of studies done on the ones you pop, you just can't stop. If you pop it open and you start to eat your way through, if you are a female, here's your typical pattern of behavior. You will work your way through until there's 4 left. And then you put the lid back on and you go, I didn't finish them. I didn't eat them all. If you're a male, there's an interesting twist in the story. If you're a male, if you eat the first tub and you have a second one, you'll eat half of that as well. So you'll go through, then you'll go and get a second tub and you'll eat about half, and then you'll stop. Probably thinking, I didn't eat 2 tubs, just 1.5. But if you don't eat the full tub, okay, if you work your way through and you leave a few, what happens is, within an hour, you'll go back and finish them. Statistically, that's what most males do. Statistically, that's what most females do. It's crazy, isn't it? We're funny creatures. But we need to stop our reliance on this, but it's really hard because it's addictive, it's powerful, it controls your hormones and emotions. And for a long, long time, as a nutritionist, I spent endless hours saying to people, stop, you need to quit this, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do this, and then you need to eat these foods. And so most people would leave the surgery, they'd leave the hospital, leave the consultation room, going, I hate him. Not going to do any of that. All the joy in my life, I need to stop to do that. No, I'm not convinced. And they just don't do it. Even when they know, they just don't do it. And what I realized is by telling people to break this relationship they had with powerful foods that were addictive, I was getting nowhere, even though it was the right thing to say. There's a difference between being right and being effective. Everyone happy that that's true? Something like that. Okay, I'll prove to you. I can be right. I can be stood at the side of the river and there's a young child drowning. And I can go, you should have learned to swim. And I'd be right. That's right. Should have learned to swim. I could say, you shouldn't have fallen in. And I would be right. Telling them they should learn to swim and telling them they shouldn't have fallen in would not be effective, even though it's right. However, if I was to throw them a rope or reach down and pull them out, I would be effective and right. And so the way to be effective and right is to get you to do things that will improve your health without me having to preach to you and convert you against all the things that you're addicted to doing. That's how I can be effective. I'm still right, because you should have good things in your diet. I'm just not dealing with the immediate problem of all the things that are going wrong. So when it comes to omega-3, we have at Zinzino the world's biggest database. Now I want to make a comment about this database, because it's come to my attention that people might have questions around it. So first of all, for those of you who don't know, the network of global research and science is a big club, and everybody knows who everyone is, and everyone knows if you're any good, if you're not. And if you're not in the club, no one really listens to you, to be honest with you. That's what it is. I remember the day I got my PhD, and the person on the stage shook my hand and said, you do realize this is just membership to a big club. And everyone's there taking pictures, and this is what I'm getting told. It was a little bit diffusing, but it's true. VITAS are the independent scientific laboratories that take care of all of our blood samples. We don't touch any of them. So when a person takes a pinprick, DBS, dry blood spot sample, puts it in a post, anonymous, it goes off to VITAS, and they analyze it. VITAS are one of the biggest, most reputable laboratories in the world. They partner with the University of Oxford, University of Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, MIT. They do projects for the UK National Health System. They've secured millions of pounds through EU funding to innovate new test methods. Thomas Gunderson, who's one of the heads of VITAS, is well published throughout the research literature with over 200 publications, most of which are in things like The Lancet and Nature. They could not have any higher credibility when it comes to science, science tech, and analysis. They are pretty much, if not the best, in that top group. They take care of all this. They send us the findings, the results, and then we analyze them and we interpret them. That database right now of independently analyzed and verified anonymous blood samples is approaching 900,000 samples. We own the conversation in this area when it comes to your ratios of omega-6 and 3 in your blood. We've got a database that institutes would kill for. In fact, they do. They approach us all the time because they want to use our database to look at some stats and research. And so if you're not taking any omega-3, if you're not taking any kind of supplement, these are your average values. You can see the age group all the way through, and the average for most of the world is 14.8 omega-6 to omega-3. This data goes up to 2020. The simple reason is we are publishing the data as a complete data set, and I can't tell you the latest data, otherwise you can't put that for peer review. It's a compromise. But believe me, it just looks like this. 14.8 to 1. And you might be thinking, well, does it matter? It does matter. The reason why it matters is because really this ratio of omega-6 to 3 should be less than 4 to 1. It should be 3 to 1 for your cells to be in the kind of condition that they should be in for you to function normally, for you to be healthy. But the average around the world is 14.8 to 1. And this is because of increased reliance on fast food, decreased presence of fatty fish, and we get omega-6 in our diet all over the place. It's in those processed foods. It's the go-to choice when people are cooking with fat at home. So we have no issue with getting omega-6, but there's an ever more compromise around getting the omega-3. So this is how the statistics look if you use another type of omega-3 supplement. So what do we think of that? 9.9 to 1. What's our feeling on that? Anyone be brave enough to say what they think? It's better. Any other comments? It's not enough. It is better. In this instance, 9.9 to 1 is definitely better than 14.8 to 1. It's true, it's better. But the difference is meaningless. It's meaningless. We're comparing the use of a typical standard product to someone who doesn't use anything at all. You're spending money to not be in ratio. They're not spending money to not be in ratio. You'd almost argue these are the clever ones. They cost them nothing to not be in ratio. They're spending good money to not be in ratio. And this is interesting to me because regularly people will say when we talk about balance oil, which is our leading product, which is unique, it's the reason why I'm at Zinzino. People will say, well, I've got an omega-3 that I use. I've used it for years. I'm really happy. Great. How's it working out for you? Have you tested to see whether you're in index? Are you testing to see whether it's effective? What change it's brought to your ratio? I don't need to. You don't need to? So you just take it and just go along with it. I find that fascinating because in sport we say if you're not testing, you're guessing. And I also find it fascinating because I always want to know as much as I can before I make a decision on anything. You should see the amount of research I put into just like changing the washing machine. I want to know what's best. I'm reading Trustpilot reviews. I'm looking at all kinds of things. And that's just the washing machine. When it comes to what I'm prepared to put in my body, I want to know, first of all, do I need it and what difference will it make? And the average person is happily consuming a product that makes no meaningful difference to their health whatsoever. We had a player just recently who joined. We work with a lot of Premiership football clubs, and we have one team back in the UK who the whole team take balance oil. And a new player was signed, and he arrived with his nutritionist, and we said, okay, so we do this test, and it's balance oil. And he said, no. I've got an omega-3 supplement, my nutritionist has recommended it, and they always paint a gorgeous picture. The fish are harvested by virgins. It's collected in a boat. They go off to these tropical islands where each fish is massaged until the oil comes out. And then we put it in this bottle and then I drink it. We're like, great, sounds amazing. We have to screen the whole squad, so we'll screen you as well. And the rest of the squad, this Premiership club, they've been taking balance oil for nearly 12 months. So all their data came back, and player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, and it's all less than 3 to 1, less than 3 to 1. And then here's our new player. Boom. Way outside 15 to 1. Way outside. We're like, well, there you go. But, if you really want to carry on taking it, hold on. All of my teammates are in ratio and index, and they all use this. And I'm the only one who's using something different, and I'm outside here. And so at first, they do the obvious thing, which is to go, it's fake. It's a fake test. You've just done that. And we have no idea. It's anonymous. Only you know that's your data. Until you tell us that's your data, we have no idea. It's just a number. It's anonymous. And then the penny drops. So I like it when people say, I use a different one. I go, brilliant. The other reason why I like it is because of this. So back in 2020, the start of lockdown 1, which, as I often tell people, was my favorite lockdown, because back home in the UK, the weather was great. I didn't have to commute to Manchester and back every day, so I wasn't traveling for hours. And I was doing lots of work, and I was working on a project for the GM Health Innovations, which was looking at omega-3. How do we get enough people to have omega-3? And I remembered my mum and my dad back in the 70s and 80s and went, great, we'll just give them a supplement. So I'll go and have a look how supplements are getting on. This paper was published in 2018. This is Cochrane. This is what's called a systematic review, meta-analysis. This is the highest order of review you can do on research literature. And the conclusion is there is little or no effect that omega-3 supplements reduce risk of experiencing heart disease, stroke, or death. This analysis review considered 112,000 people across 79 scientific trials of the highest order, and the conclusion is standard omega-3 fish oil products don't work. So you don't need me to tell you they don't work. You don't need to look at this, which is our data set, rapidly approaching 1 million. The information's already out there. Across the research world and communities, we know how important omega-3 is. We know we need to find a way to address that 6.3 billion deficiency, to reduce the risk of non-communicable disease, to give people better health, enable them to live better. The trick is, well, how do we do it? And that's what I was faced with as a research coordinator back in 2020. I'd already gone through the process of dietary change because I'm a nutritionist, and realized we can't do it. I've explained some of the reasons why we can't do it. So I'll tell you the other reason why you can't do it. The other reason why you can't all have a really excellent piece of line-caught, fresh, fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, tuna, every day. Do you want to know why? It costs a fortune. So the really rich people can do it when they can access it. Not always guaranteed they can get it every day. But as you go down and you look at health parity, middle earners to low income, they can't. So there's a price barrier, as well as an ecological barrier, as well as an ethical barrier, a moral barrier, a sustainability barrier, a practical barrier. We just can't do it that way. I can't speak to a room of people like you and say, right, so from tomorrow, all of you eat fresh salmon every day, and we're going to fix this. Woo, high fives, and we all run out. It's a big lie. It's not going to happen. And so the next step is to go, well, we'll give them a supplement. And I went through all the research and found the same thing. And then the Cochrane review sums it up. And then I had that phone call. A good friend of mine who at the time worked for an American sportswear brand. They're pretty big everywhere now, called Under Armour. And he was high up in Under Armour. And I'd worked for Under Armour in the past. I'd been an ambassador. I'd done proof of concept testing for Under Armour. And Tony had had some health issues over the years. He'd had a stroke at a young age. Same age as me, he'd had a stroke, just not a great lifestyle. And his physician in America had said, you know, you're omega-3 deficient. And there's a product I know works. It's from the Scandinavian company called Zinzino. But Tony didn't trust the physician. He's like, what do doctors know? So he rung me up and he said, Col, you're my go-to guy about nutrition. Have you ever heard of Zinzino? And I said, no, but if you're going to tell me they make an omega-3 supplement, they don't work. I know that. I'm doing a report on it right now. I've got a review. Omega-3 supplements don't work. And Tony said to me, thankfully, he said, no, I want you to have a look at it. He said, because this physician, this doctor in the States is convinced that this is the one. He said the same as you. He said omega-3s don't work, but this one does. And he's recommended it. Will you have a look at it for me? And I always explain this the same way. It's very rare in science as a researcher or practitioner that you get a eureka moment. It's very rare. But because it was Tony, I thought I'll have a look, and I loaded up the web page and I pressed go. And when I saw the formulation, all those hours I'd spent in the research around omega-3s, about where they come from in nature, about why they're effective, why they're not effective, why fresh fish works and intensively aquacultured fish doesn't, and why supplements don't work. And I looked at the formulation on the balance oil and I was like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? The genius is so simple, but that's what makes it genius, is they'd rebound the omega-3 to a polyphenol, so that they blended the omega-3 with the extra virgin olive oil. It protects the omega-3 in itself as a powerful anti-inflammatory. It's a catalyst, it's a chaperone, it carries the omega-3 to the cell. That's how you get the fix. And I genuinely thought, how had I not thought of this? I know the mechanism. Why have I not thought of this myself? And so, when we look at the impact that that product has, first of all, let's look at the index, the level. So we've discussed what the ratio needs to be. You need to have omega-6 to 3 in a ratio of less than 3 to 1. What matters a lot, and what you will see across the research, is the total amount of fat in your body should be a minimum 8% from the EPA, the DHA, the omega-3. When it's not, when you're less than 4%, you're in a pro-inflammatory. This really constitutes to a high risk of development of non-communicable disease. 4 to 8% is moderate risk, so you're still at moderate risk of development of something of that ilk. And the threshold is 8% and up, you are in an anti-inflammatory phase, your inflammatory markers are under control, you've got a sufficient amount of omega-3 present to control that biochemical environment, and you're at the lowest risk of development of non-communicable disease. On average, what we see when we do initial tests for most people around the world is they are 4% and less. When we test our elite athletes, who you might think are better at this, given the fact that they're high performers, they come out on average of 4.4. And why? Because elite athletes are humans, they have strange diets themselves, high-performance diets, and they exercise and train every single day, which means they use more of it as fuel, and they kick up more inflammatory markers every single day as a process of what they do. But the most powerful part about this chart is not those categories. It's just that measurably, the balance oil, our solution in this area, brings people from a pro-inflammatory stage into an anti-inflammatory. Over 97% of the time, we can achieve that in 120 days. So in 4 months, you can change your health consequences measurably. You can get your index exactly where it needs to be. And then you can build on that. And then someone will say, well, how can you do that if you don't reduce your AA? Because biochemically, the interaction of these two components is different when we look at exogenous, which is external, to endogenous. So exogenous amount to endogenous activity. When there is a sufficient amount as a total from the omega-3 takes charge of the cell. Works kind of like a conductor. Starts to control what's going on. But here is the big data. This is the powerful bit. So we know where you are if you don't take anything. 14.8, you're not in a great place. If you take standard fish oil supplement, 9.9. Better than this, but still terrible, to be honest with you. This only looks good because of how bad that is. We all know that kind of situation, don't we? You know, sometimes something only looks good because there's something else that's much, much worse. So this is a false positive. But this is where you need to be. Less than 3 to 1. And again, this is drawn from a database. The database at the time when this data was extrapolated was just over 600,000 samples. It's nearly 900,000. By the time we get halfway into next year, we'll hit the million, no problem. And then we are on the big data bit where more information won't tell us anything new. And we get this by our second test, which means that by the time someone has taken the product for 120 days, 4 months, they're exactly where they need to be. So the way I explained this yesterday, I don't know how successful it was, but I'm going to try and do it again anyway. Imagine that you and I are playing a game of score the goal. We're in a field, there's a football goal, there's one ball, we get to kick it each, and if one of us kicks it in the net, you get €1 million. Good game? Up for a go? Yeah? I'd have a go, personally. I don't know how you're getting on in life, but that'd make a big difference to my lifestyle. So, imagine I go first, I kick the ball, and it goes flying off into the corner. Miles out. No million. Yep. You look keen. You go next. You kick the ball, and it goes off, and it's just outside the goalposts. Still no million. You were closer than me, but you didn't score a goal. In fact, it's probably more frustrating for you, because I missed by miles. But you were that close. You've got to live with that for the rest of your life. Could have had $1 million if I'd just been that way. And that's what this is. There's me kicking into the corner. There's you kicking outside the posts. But then you come along, wallop it down the middle, £2.8 million. You're either there or you're not. Close is not close enough. And it doesn't matter whether I'm better than you. What it matters is whether I'm in that zone. It's not a competition. So how does it get you into balance? How does our product work where other products don't? We tell everyone this all the time. I don't know why someone else hasn't copied it. Well, they've tried to, but there's been some really poor jobs. But basically, it's this. So the extra virgin, the high-grade olive oil is in itself an anti-inflammatory. So there is not a doctor in the world that does not recommend to their patients to take a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil every single day. Powerful anti-inflammatory, really good for your health, keeps you well. Just do that. Take it every day. Yep, everyone heard that message before? Everyone know that's a relatively safe message. I've got lots of friends who are physicians, doctors, consultants, all that kind of stuff. And they'll go, yeah, we tell everybody to do that. Of course they should. It's powerful anti-inflammatory. But also, when you find an omega-3 in nature, whether it's in the algae or in the fish, it's bound to a polyphenol. Nature's really good at knowing how we need to have things. It really is. And never understand why you buy bananas in a bag. If there's one fruit in the world that doesn't need a bag, it's a banana. It comes in its own bag. Nature knows how to serve things up to us. And when we refine the fish oil, we separate it. And we have to refine it. We have to get the toxins out, the heavy metals. We need to make sure it's got a low totox value so that it's not going to cause any harm, so that you've got this really good, usable fish oil. We actually use the highest possible grade fish oil in the world, bar none. We're big on quality. But you separate it from the polyphenol. That leaves the omega-3 vulnerable. It can go off, it can go toxic. When the air, contact with air, heat, light, and then when you consume it, this stomach in here, it's hot. It's warm inside, and there's lots of acid. And I don't know if you know this, but and this might put you off food for the rest of your life. It doesn't bother me because I'm an anatomist. But everything you eat no matter how nice it is and how lovely it is, it goes into the stomach and it gets turned into this like acidic soup. It all just gets turned into this mulchy acidic soup, and then that gets pushed down through the tract so that it can absorb and take all the other nutrients out. So whether that's lovely caviar or you've been for a really nice tapas meal or whatever it is, it's just acidic gloop, and then it gets pushed down. Well, the omega-3, when it's not in the chaperone of the polyphenol, that just destroys it. It just destroys it. The heat, the environment, so very little of it gets through the stomach, and then barely any gets to the cell, which I've already shown you. The clever part about this is it acts as a chaperone. It protects it. So it's anti-inflammatory itself, and then it protects the omega-3 through that digestive tract so it can be active at a cellular level. It's really clever. Honestly, April 2020, I'm looking at this going, oh my, why didn't I think of this? This is obviously the solution. Zinzino don't do anything by half, so they went then and sourced the highest phytonutrient olive oil you can possibly find in the world. There's only 2 people that make it. We've got exclusive contracts with them both. Ours has 750 milligram per kilogram of polyphenols compared to a standard 100. So the polyphenol count in that bottle is second to none. So the olive and olive oil polyphenols protect the omega-3 from oxidation and carry it all the way through to the cell. That's why our statistics look decidedly different to anybody else's, because it's protected and it's enabled into the cell, which is where it needs to be active. I go around the world telling everyone this. I've done talks online to thousands of people. We write this on the website. Anybody who is inclined to copy what we do, we're not holding back the secret. The data we have, we're going to share through the peer review, through the scientific community. We're going to tell everyone the power this has and how to do it. But I know the reason why the vast majority of the industry won't do it. Because it costs a lot to do it that way. And most of the industry is focused on bottom line. We're focused on trying to change health. It's a different type of ambition. And so my philosophy as a nutritionist is you add before you subtract. So rather than me have a talk with each of you and say, stop eating chocolate bars and don't go to McDonald's anymore and cut down on your glasses of wine, doesn't get me anywhere. Did that for years, blah, 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 blah. No one listened. The child would drown. No one listens. So what you should do is, based on the good science of epigenetics, is just start to add good stuff in. You could do that today. You could do it tomorrow. You could go home, you could buy some fresh blueberries and go, right, I'm going to eat them over the course of the next few days, packed full of antioxidants, packed full of vitamin C, dietary hydration. No matter what else you've got going on in your diet, that's going to make a positive impact. So you could start to change your gene expression. But all of this changes it more profoundly. And we have a process that's called the health protocol. We balance, restore, and boost. We don't boost your immune system, no one can. We boost the amount of vitamins and minerals that your immune system needs. But we balance you at a cellular level. That's what you are. You're a collection of cells. We address the gut microbiota. I'll come back to that in a moment. And we make sure that you've got enough vitamins and minerals on a daily basis to have normalized immune function and for your body to communicate. So, this is the point you need to take notes on. There's an exam at the end. If you fail this, you're not allowed to leave the room. Fair enough. There are approximately 37 trillion cells in the human body. It's incredible, isn't it? That's what you are. That's what you're made of. You start as one cell. It's incredible. Each life in this room, we start as one cell. And in that one cell is the code for who you'll become. And it replicates and replicates and replicates and replicates, and that code goes out, and you become the fetus, and then you become the child, and you grow and you develop, and it was all written into that one cell. It is miraculous, powerful work of nature. You're only as good as your cells. That's what you're made of. Think about your house, the bricks, the wood it's made of, the strength, the rigidity, the robustness of your house is based on those materials. You're the same. If you're wrong at a cellular level, you're wrong at every level. There's heaps we don't know about cells, believe it or not. There's loads we're still figuring out about how they do, but we know one thing for sure: the environment for the cell is critical. And the environment needs to be that the cell membrane is nice and malleable, soft, we can get nutrients in, and we can get toxins out. And when we do that, we have good, healthy cells that last, they replicate, and you get good, healthy cells again. And that's where the omega-6-3 ratio comes into its own. These have to be in balance. You have to have less than 4:1, less than 3:1, to have optimal cellular ratio and balance. If not, it's off kilter, and there's a compromise to the cell. And given the fact that you're made of 37 trillion of them, and that's what you are, if they're wrong, you're wrong. And it's not a matter of when will something happen, not a matter if something will happen, but when something will happen. And we have the only product in the whole marketplace that has a proven efficacy. It changes that, it improves it. I get obsessed, sometimes I get a bit lost, because this is actually such a beautiful picture of a cell. It really is. I get quite emotional about it. Like, all life stems from these things. It is remarkable. It really, really is. And every bit of information about who you are is written into that. It's phenomenal. It really is. Let's move on before I get too philosophical. Right. The gut. The tropical rainforest inside you. Now, anyone in the room who's reasonably good at maths and has been paying half attention, there are 100 trillion bacteria in your gut. So, how many cells do you have? 37 trillion. How many bacteria do you have? 100 trillion bacteria. So make no bones about it, you are just a planet for something else to live on. Inside you are these trillions of bacteria who probably get together and have book club and wonder about the meaning of life and what goes on outside in space, and it seems to be endless. And that's what you do, you're a host. But the good thing is unlike us and how we impact our planet, they love you. They want to keep you intact. 70% of your immune system is in the gut. And if you feed these things, they will help you to thrive, not only survive. They will keep you well and healthy if you feed them. If you feed enough of the good bacteria, they overwhelm the bad bacteria, and you keep everything in balance in the gut. And that's how you absorb nutrients from other foods. Unfortunately, some of the foods that we eat, the convenience foods, the fast foods, the processed foods, actually kill them. You remember I told you at the start, something's either positive or negative. The gut is the center of the human universe. What happens in here shapes up everything else that happens. If they are winning, if you're feeding them and keeping them alive, it's the first port of call for absorption. What goes in there is going to get absorbed, put to good use. The fact is, lots of us eat foods that kill them off. And the way to feed them is to give them dietary fibers on a daily basis. And that's what we do. So the second part of our health protocol is we feed on a daily basis those essential dietary fibers. You feed the good gut bacteria so that they can win that war, that they can function on your behalf, and that 70% of the immune system can work for you and not against you. It's as simple as that. We know it's a common deficiency all around the world. People who are less and less eating whole foods, less and less eating vegetables, eating fruit, less and less dietary fibers, and therefore people are having, there's an increase year on year of gut-related disorders. Everything from irritable bowel syndrome all the way through to the most severe debilitating conditions there are. They're increasing year on year as the prevalence of dietary fibers decreases year on year. It is correlation, cause, and effect. And we empower you to feed them every single day. I'm interested in probiotics. And for those of you who don't know the difference, a probiotic is where you drink something normally and you put good bacteria into the gut. Everyone familiar with them? You probably know some brands. There's typically an advert that says it's got science inside and you drink it. I think there's a good argument. But currently where the argument falls down with probiotics is if you're not feeding the bacteria you have, and you put new bacteria in, you're not going to feed them either. So what do you expect is going to happen to them? They'll just die as well. It makes no sense to me. If you don't have a prebiotic strategy, which are those dietary fibers, then why put more in there? It's a crazy mentality. So start with the pre. Prebiotics are essential. Feed what you have, nurture this environment, reduce blood sugar spikes, promote gut health, balance your cholesterol levels, healthy bowel function, and balanced microbiome. And then you're in a really good place to start to absorb nutrients better from the rest of your food. And then we get to vitamins and minerals. And this is an area, in my experience, that people just take for granted now. They really do. They've stopped thinking about it. 22 years ago, I attended a seminar in America, and a nutritionist, a leading professor of nutrition from Stanford, got up and talked about vitamin D and the vitamin D deficiency. And he said, we've got a big problem because our changes in behavior, climatal changes, we don't spend enough time in the sun. When we do, we've got sunscreen on, we've got clothes on. Because of the way we work, we're typically more indoors nowadays. People need to start to supplement with vitamin D. And he went through data after data, epidemiology, scientific journal, and I was convinced. And from that day forward, I kept up to date with the research in the area of vitamin D. And I started to put it into my presentations. So the first time I spoke about it publicly was at a national conference in the UK in 2001. And I said, we need to tell people they need to supplement with vitamin D. You know, we're not synthesizing enough of it through our skin, through exposure to the sun anymore. It's difficult to achieve through the diet. It's an essential component of immune function. We're going to have a huge issue on immune function if people don't supplement with vitamin D. And I kept saying it. And I kept up to date with the research, and I kept saying it, and I kept saying it, and I kept saying it. No one really listened. It wasn't just me. There were other nutritionists and researchers out there who were saying, vitamin D, really important. And then COVID-19 happened, and the world got locked down. And data was emerging from all over the world that the people who were deficient in vitamin D were experiencing some of the most severe symptoms. And I kid you not, the day that news made the headlines in the UK, I received over 700 messages and emails of people saying, Col, I've heard you talk about vitamin D. Where can I get some? It took a global pandemic before people went, yeah, vitamin D is important. But there's more to vitamins and minerals than that. There's C, K, E, B, B6, B12. Vitamins are how your body communicates. They play a part in every single type of biochemical process. If it's not there, there's a gap in the communication and things don't happen. And that's how I'd like you to think about vitamins from this day forward. Think about your body trying to communicate, trying to regulate and do all the things it needs to do. Manage your pH levels, manage your cognitive function, your immune response. If they're not there, they can't do it. And I always say this, so I'm going to say it again. Imagine I asked you to write the story of your life. And I want to know everything, your fondest childhood memories to the worst, the loves of your lives, the heartbreaks, the searing heights, the most amazing things you've done, the toughest times. Tell me it all. But you're not allowed to use any words that have the letter A, B, C, D, E, K. You can't use any of them. Fair enough? How good's your book going to be? How well are you going to communicate your message now that you can't use any of those words? Think about that when it comes to your immune function. Think about that when it comes to how your body processes information. If they are not there, it can't do it. And a key deficiency is vitamin D, as is B12, as is vitamin C, believe it or not. And most people think they've got vitamin C under control. K2. And then we get into those minerals. Mineral deficiency is becoming more and more of a problem. And why? Because less people eat things that come out the ground. So we need to put minerals back in. And we do it with Extend. And we looked at this and we measured it and we recalculated it and we made sure we got it right and we looked at it every single way. And the truth is, if you take 4 capsules of this product, Extend, it is the equivalent of eating 3,000 calories worth of the most nutrient-dense food every day. And we really tested. That's a bold statement. And I don't like making bold statements unless we can back them up. So myself and other members of the product team and the research team, we really looked at this. How would you achieve the same amount of nutrients that are in those 4 capsules through a diet? And on average, that would mean consuming 3,000 calories worth of nutrient-dense food every single day. And the fact is, most of the food that you're probably consuming isn't giving you anywhere near enough nutrients anyway. You might not need to take 4. You might only need to take 1, 2, 3. But remember that epigenetics? Remember that notion that I brought forward that you just start to add things in? You start by adding before you subtract. Put powerful things in. Start to reorientate your health with a win, not a loss. Humans aren't hardwired to think of a loss as a benefit. So when I take something off you, you feel hard done to. So you come and speak to me and you want to be better, and I go, right, give me those chocolate bars. And you go, that's not great. I was quite happy eating them. Now I don't have them anymore. But when I say I don't care about that, but I want you to add this, add is seen as a benefit. And it gives me the opportunity to reorientate what it is that you do. But most importantly, I know you're in a better position. The minute I start to add these things in, regardless of what you do, because we're never working towards perfection, we're always working towards improvement. So regardless of what it is you do, by making sure you have a sufficient amount of omega-3, by making sure that you have a sufficient amount of dietary fibers, by making sure on a daily basis you have all the vitamins and minerals you need, things start to improve. You are in a better position. And we can work with that. We can make more adjustments. We can fine-tune it. We can alter things to improve things all the more. And this is another bold statement. I need to change what I say, because I always say I don't like making bold statements. But I've clearly arrived at a point in life where I'm making lots of bold statements. So maybe I do. The antidote to a high-energy, nutrition-low diet is to put back in what's missing, to balance, restore, and boost. And again, it's boosting the amount, not the immune function. Your immune system's incredible. Just keep it doing what it does. Support it to do what it does. This provocative language that says we can boost immune systems, it sounds great, but it's not true. All you can do is give your immune system all the tools it needs to function the way it's meant to. It's developed and evolved over 6 million years, 350,000 years in our current form. It's kind of quite a slick process. We do more to hinder it than we do enhance it. Let's just get out of its way. Give it what it needs to do its job. But it starts from here, recognizing that the cell is what you are and getting that into the condition it needs to be in. And then recognizing that you want to best absorb the foods that you eat. So taking care of that tropical rainforest, that human universe. And then making sure there are sufficient vitamins and minerals for your body to communicate and do what it needs to do. Now, something that I may have pointed out, but I want to draw more attention to, is that 60% of your brain is fat, and 20% of that fat is DHA, which is one of the 2 omega-3s, the EPA and the DHA. The DHA is the one that contributes towards cognitive function, neurological factors. The EPA is the one more associated with reducing your inflammatory markers. In order for you to act differently, you need to be in a position where you can think differently, because it's thoughts that lead to actions and not the other way around. So if you need to make changes in your diet about reducing the things that you know actually aren't making you any better, that you should have less often than more often, and in some instances eliminate altogether, You're not going to do that with old thinking. You're not going to do that from a state that you commence from if the state is compromised. But by starting to add in and changing those parameters, you empower yourself to cognitively have a different set of functions, to think differently, to feel differently, because experience is everything. And when you start to feel and think better, well, that in itself becomes quite perpetuating, quite addictive. That feels quite nice. Sometimes we don't understand how off we feel until we start to feel better. And I would assure all of you, the track to success is not to go home in the cupboards and go, I shouldn't eat that anymore. It's to start to put things in. It's start to measurably enhance and powerfully transform your diet. And by doing so, transform your health. We function in the preventative health space. The best thing you can ever do, I promise you, I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of patients undergoing the worst possible kinds of conditions and circumstances. The best thing you can do is not get sick. The best thing you can do is invest in your health rather than invest in your recovery. And if you're dealing with a condition, still the best thing you can do is optimize your health, because by doing so, you optimize your outcomes. There is no argument. All over the world, we've exhausted systems whereby the whole patch it up and manage it can't cope anymore, because the demographics, the epidemiology, the statistics of people going that way is so overwhelming, the system can't cope. And for a long time, I've gone around the world through my research, through my work, I've campaigned and said what we need to do, instead of pulling people out the river, we need to go upstream and stop them falling in. We need to get people to own their own health. We need to get you all to be individually accountable for your health, to make decisions to enhance your health on a daily basis, to live better, and by living better, have a better life experience. Do more, achieve more, have greater satisfaction and quality of life. Stop the clock. Don't be a statistic. Don't join in the current march towards inevitable illness, because you don't have to. It's voluntary. Eat better, move more, do a bit of exercise, dance as often as you can, and you'll be fine. That's the secret to it, I promise you. And so, my final comment on the formal part of the presentation is simple. The idea, which I used to subscribe to, that we can change everything by having a whole stock change to enhance and overhaul in our diet, sounds amazing, but lacks reality. Sounds incredible, but lacks efficacy, sustainability, and achievability. The way to do this now is to use 21st century food technology, 21st century thinking to fix a 21st century problem, so that we can all just live better, be better, do more, have more, and gain more. Thanks for listening. Hopefully some of that was useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. And now time for questions.